Harper Reyes clutched her borrowed evening coat tighter. As she watched Ethan Cole slip his phone back into his jacket pocket, his jaw set in a hard line that she was beginning to recognize. Meant bad news from the outside world. The discovery had happened purely by accident 20 minutes earlier. While Ethan excused himself during intermission, Harper had glimpsed his phone screen lighting up with notifications, dozens of them. Stock alerts, board meeting reminders, and a calendar packed with billion-dollar decisions. The name Ethan Cole, CEO, appeared in a Reuters headline preview that made her stomach drop. She'd been sitting next to one of the most powerful tech moguls in the world, completely oblivious, treating him like any other lonely guy in an expensive suit. Now, as the second half of the concert began, Harper found herself stealing glances at this man she thought she'd been getting to know. The pianist's fingers danced across the keys in a hauntingly beautiful Chopin nocturne. But Harper could barely focus on the music that usually transported her completely. Instead, she was acutely aware of Ethan's presence beside her. The way he sat perfectly still, his breathing measured and controlled, his hands folded with the precision of someone who'd learned never to show weakness. "You're different," she whispered, so quietly she wasn't sure he'd hear her over the music. His head turned slightly toward her, gray eyes catching the stage lights. "Different how? You were looser before, like you'd forgotten something heavy." For a while, she paused, watching his expression carefully. "Now you look like you're carrying the world again." Ethan's throat worked as he swallowed. No one had ever read him so clearly, certainly not someone who'd known him for all of 3 hours. His business associates saw what they wanted to see: power, success, the bottomless bank account. His few remaining friends from college treated him like a walking ATM or a networking opportunity. Even the women he'd dated seemed more interested in the lifestyle he could provide than in him as a person. But Harper looked at him like he was just human. "The world has a way of reminding you it's there," he murmured back, his voice barely audible over the piano. "Does it ever get tiring, being responsible for so much?" The question caught him off guard. In his world, admitting fatigue was admitting weakness. But something about the gentle darkness of the concert hall and Harper's genuine curiosity made honesty feel safe. "Every day," he admitted. The pianist transitioned into a piece that made Harper's breath catch: Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece her grandmother used to hum while cooking dinner in their tiny Queens apartment. Tears pricked at her eyes, not just from the memory, but from the realization that this moment felt impossibly fragile. Tomorrow, Ethan would go back to his billionaire's life, and she'd return to her classroom of 7-year-olds and her studio apartment with the broken air conditioner. "My grandmother loved this piece," she whispered, not caring that tears were sliding down her cheeks. "She died last year, cancer." Without thinking, Ethan reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm and slightly callous, surprising for someone who lived in boardrooms. Harper's fingers were small in his, paint still faintly staining her cuticles from an art project with her students earlier that week. "She would have loved seeing you here tonight," he said softly, "in a place like this, experiencing something beautiful." Harper turned to look at him fully then, seeing past the expensive clothes and perfectly styled hair to something raw and kind in his eyes. "You're not what I expected a billionaire to be like." "What did you expect? Someone who wouldn't notice if I was crying? Someone who wouldn't care about my grandmother?" She squeezed his hand gently. "Someone who wouldn't have stood up to those ushers for a stranger." Ethan felt something crack open in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. "Maybe I'm not much of a billionaire then. Maybe that's not a bad thing." They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands intertwined, watching the pianist pour his soul into the music. Harper found herself memorizing details, the way Ethan's thumb traced gentle circles on her wrist, how his breathing seemed to sync with hers, the fact that he smelled like expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him, clean and masculine and reassuring. For Ethan, holding Harper's hand felt like anchoring himself to something real. Her skin was soft, but her grip was strong, speaking to someone who worked with her hands, who wasn't afraid of effort. She didn't fidget or check her phone or whisper commentary about the other audience members' outfits. She was simply present, absorbed in the music. occasionally squeezing his fingers when a particularly moving passage swept through the hall. As the concert reached its crescendo, both of them knew that whatever was happening between them couldn't be dismissed as simple attraction. The connection felt deeper, more fundamental, like two puzzle pieces discovering they fit together despite coming from completely different boxes. When the final notes faded and the audience erupted in applause, they were slow to release each other's hands. The spell of the concert hall was breaking, and reality was creeping back in. Ethan's phone was already buzzing with urgent messages, and Harper could see his assistant hovering near the exit, clearly anxious to whisk him away to whatever important obligation came next. "I should go," Ethan said reluctantly, though he made no move to stand. "I know," Harper replied. But she didn't let go of his hand either. They looked at each other in the growing bustle of the emptying theater, both knowing that this moment was ending, but neither quite ready to let it go. 3 days later, Harper was elbow-deep in finger paint and construction paper when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I can't stop thinking about Rachmaninoff. And you, coffee?" She stared at the message for a full minute, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. After the concert, she'd convinced herself that their connection had been a beautiful fluke, the kind of once-in-a-lifetime moment that existed perfectly in memory, but couldn't survive the harsh light of day. Billionaires didn't text elementary school teachers. They didn't think about strangers 3 days later. But apparently, Ethan Cole did. "I know a place. Not fancy. Hope that's okay," she texted back, then immediately regretted it. Of course he'd want somewhere fancy. He probably ate gold-flaked everything. Perfect. "I'm tired of fancy." That afternoon, Harper found herself nervously rearranging the sugar packets at Morningside Cafe, a cramped little spot near her school that served coffee in mismatched mugs and had exactly 3 wobbly tables. She'd changed out of her paint-stained teaching clothes into jeans and a soft blue sweater, but she still felt underdressed for a man who probably owned more watches than she had pairs of shoes. When Ethan walked through the door, she almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the perfect suit, replaced by dark jeans and a simple gray Henley that made his eyes look silver. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it, and he looked younger somehow, more approachable. He spotted her immediately and smiled, not the polite, measured smile she imagined he wore in business meetings, but something genuine and a little nervous. "Hi," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Hi yourself." Harper studied his face, looking for signs that this was all an elaborate joke or charitable gesture. "You know, when you said coffee, I half expected you to invite me to some rooftop restaurant where they serve espresso in tiny golden cups." Ethan laughed, and the sound sent warmth shooting through Harper's chest. "I thought about it. Then I realized I wanted to see you somewhere real, somewhere that's yours." "This is definitely mine," Harper said, gesturing around at the peeling paint and the barista, who was currently arguing with the ancient espresso machine. "I come here every day after school. The owner, Mrs. Chen, always saves me the day-old muffins." "It's perfect," Ethan said, and meant it. The cafe was cramped and loud and completely unpretentious, the opposite of every sterile, carefully curated space he usually inhabited. He felt like he could breathe here. Mrs. Chen shuffled over with a notepad, eyeing Ethan suspiciously. "You want the usual, Harper, and your friend here. Just coffee, black." Ethan said. Mrs. Chen snorted. "Coffee's not black here, honey. It's got personality. You want personality, or you want to go to Starbucks?" Harper bit back a grin at the look of confusion on Ethan's face. "He'll take personality. Mrs. Chen, trust you completely." As Mrs. Chen wandered away, muttering in Mandarin, Ethan shook his head. "I don't think anyone's called me honey since I was 12. "Welcome to Queens," Harper said. "Everyone's either your grandmother or your drinking buddy, no in between." They fell into conversation easily, the awkwardness melting away as they talked about everything and nothing. Harper told him about her students, how 7-year-old Marcus insisted dinosaurs still existed in New Jersey, and how little Sophia drew family portraits where everyone had purple hair. Because purple is the happiest color, Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in months, charmed by Harper's animated storytelling and the way her whole face lit up. When she talked about her kids in return, he found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. How he'd started his company in his college dorm room because he couldn't afford rent and needed a way to stay housed. How success had come so fast and so overwhelmingly that he sometimes felt like he was playing a role instead of living his life. How he missed his mother every day, but especially when he sat in board meetings and wondered what she would think of the man he'd become. She'd be proud, Harper said quietly when he finished talking about his mother. You've built something incredible. You've created jobs for thousands of people. That matters, does it? Ethan asked, suddenly looking very young. Sometimes I feel like I'm just moving money around, making rich people richer. I can't remember the last time I did something that actually helped someone. Harper reached across the small table and covered his hand with hers, just like she had at the concert. You helped me. That night with the ushers, you didn't have to do that. That was nothing. It wasn't nothing to me. Her thumb traced across his knuckles. You made me feel like I belonged somewhere I never thought I could fit. That's not nothing. Ethan turned his hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. Her hand fit perfectly in his, small and warm and steady. You make me feel like I belong somewhere too. Somewhere that isn't a boardroom or a networking event. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined over coffee cups and crumb-covered plates, the noise of the cafe fading into white noise around them. Harper studied Ethan's face, the sharp line of his jaw, the tiny scar near his left eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled. She was memorizing him, she realized, storing away details like a miser hoarding gold. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. Why did you text me? Really? You could have anyone. Models, actresses, other billionaires with trust funds and summer houses. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. Because, he said finally, you're the first person in years who looked at me and saw just me. Not my bank account or my company or what I could do for them. Just me. He paused, thumb tracing circles on her wrist. And because when you cried during that Rachmaninoff piece, I wanted to hold you until you felt better. I've never wanted to protect someone like that before. Harper felt heat bloom in her chest and spread outward, warming her from the inside out. Ethan, I know it's crazy, he continued, words coming faster now, like he was afraid he'd lose his nerve. I know we're from different worlds. I know. This probably can't work, but I can't stop thinking about you, Harper. About your laugh and the way you see beauty in everything, and how you make me feel like a better version of myself. Harper squeezed his hand tighter. It is crazy, she agreed, but maybe crazy isn't always bad. Maybe not, he said, hope creeping into his voice. They finished their coffee slowly, reluctant to end the afternoon. When they finally stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sun was beginning to set, painting the Queens streetscape in shades of gold and amber. Walk with me? Harper asked, and Ethan nodded immediately. They wandered through her neighborhood, Harper pointing out landmarks that mattered to her: the corner where she had her first kiss at 16, the bodega where she bought lottery tickets every Friday and never won, the park where she'd cried after her grandmother's funeral. With each story, Ethan felt like he was collecting pieces of her, understanding the foundation of who she was. When they reached her building, a modest pre-war walk-up with fire escapes zigzagging down the brick facade, they stopped, both knowing the evening was ending, but neither ready to say goodbye. Thank you, Harper said softly, for coffee, for listening, for being unexpected. Thank you for showing me your world, Ethan replied. It's beautiful, you're beautiful. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and uncertainty. Harper felt her breath catch as Ethan stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek gently. Can I kiss you? He asked, voice rough with wanting. Instead of answering, Harper rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss outside Harper's apartment building changed everything and nothing all at once. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as Harper's hands fisted in Ethan's Henley and pulled him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the world felt different, charged with possibility and fraught with complications they weren't quite ready to face. That was 2 weeks ago. Now they existed in a strange liminal space, texting constantly, but seeing each other in careful, measured doses, coffee dates that stretched into dinner, long walks through Central Park where Ethan wore baseball caps and sunglasses like some kind of celebrity disguise, quiet evenings in Harper's tiny apartment where she cooked pasta on her ancient stove, while Ethan sat at her kitchen table, laptop closed for once, just watching her move around the cramped space, like she was performing magic. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Harper had finally agreed to see his world. "I feel ridiculous," Harper muttered, tugging at the hem of the black cocktail dress Ethan had sent over that afternoon. It was beautiful, probably cost more than her monthly rent, but it felt like wearing a costume. "You look incredible," Ethan said from the doorway of her bedroom, and his voice was rough with something that made heat pool low in Harper's belly. He was back in his armor, a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that transformed him from the soft, accessible man she'd been getting to know back into Ethan Cole, Billionaire CEO. "I look like I'm playing dress up," Harper said. But she was looking at him in the mirror as she said it, and the naked want in his eyes made her feel anything but ridiculous. "Harper." His voice was low, careful. "You don't have to do this. We can stay and order pizza, watch bad movies. I don't care about the gala." She turned to face him fully, taking in the way he filled her doorway. How the expensive clothes couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. "You care. It's important. For your company, for the foundation. I'm not going to be the reason you miss something that matters to you. You matter to me," he said simply, and the words hit Harper like a physical force. She crossed the small room to stand in front of him, reaching up to straighten his already perfect bow tie. "Then let's go show your world what they're dealing with." The gala was everything Harper had expected and somehow worse. The venue was a museum that had been transformed into a glittering wonderland of crystal and gold, filled with people who moved through the space like they owned it, which Harper realized many of them probably did. Everyone was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that spoke of personal trainers and professional stylists, and access to things Harper couldn't even imagine. Ethan's hand was warm and steady on her lower back as he guided her through the crowd, introducing her to board members and investors and other tech moguls with names she recognized from business magazines. She smiled and shook hands and made small talk, hyper-aware of the way people's eyes lingered on her, not unkindly, exactly, but with curiosity. Who was this unknown woman on Ethan Cole's arm? "You're doing great," Ethan murmured in her ear during a brief moment alone at the bar. "Am I?" Harper accepted a glass of champagne from the bartender, actual champagne, not the cheap stuff she was used to. "I feel like everyone's trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Let them wonder," Ethan said, his hand sliding around her waist. Possessively, "I know exactly what you're doing here." "What's that?" "Making me the luckiest man in the room." Harper felt heat bloom across her cheeks, but before she could respond, a perfectly manicured hand landed on Ethan's shoulder. "Ethan, darling, I was hoping I'd see you tonight." Harper turned to see a stunning brunette in a dress that probably cost more than Harper's car. She was tall and elegant, and looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread, all glossy hair and red lips, and the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your place in the world. "Victoria," Ethan said, and Harper didn't miss the slight tension that crept into his voice. "I didn't know you were back from Milan. Just flew in this morning." Victoria's smile was warm, but her eyes were calculating as they swept over Harper. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Harper Reyes," Harper said, extending her hand before Ethan could introduce her. "Nice to meet you." "Victoria Ashford," the woman replied, her handshake brief and dismissive. "Ethan and I have known each other for ages, haven't we?" "Darling, there was history there," Harper realized. "Recent history?" Judging by the way Victoria's hand lingered on Ethan's arm and the way she leaned just a little too close when she spoke to him. "Victoria runs a gallery in Soho," Ethan explained, but his attention was focused on Harper, watching for signs of discomfort. "Oh, how lovely." Victoria's voice had that particular pitch that wealthy women used when they were being politely condescending. "Are you in the arts as well, Harper?" "I'm a teacher," Harper said simply. "How noble." Victoria's smile sharpened. "Public school, elementary. I teach second grade." "Bless you." Victoria said in a tone that suggested she thought Harper deserved pity rather than blessing. That must be so challenging. Ethan, we simply must catch up properly. There are some pieces I think would be perfect for your penthouse. Actually, Ethan started, but Victoria was already linking her arm through his. Just for a moment, she said, shooting Harper an apologetic look that didn't reach her eyes. Art business. You understand? And before Harper could object, Victoria was steering Ethan away into the crowd, leaving Harper standing alone at the bar with a glass of champagne and the sudden, crushing realization that she was completely out of her depth. She lasted 10 minutes trying to make conversation with strangers who looked through her, like she was invisible before she needed air. The museum had a terrace that overlooked the city, and Harper slipped outside, grateful for the cool night breeze after the stifling atmosphere inside. Overwhelming, isn't it? Harper turned to find an older woman beside her, elegant in the way of someone who'd been wealthy for so long she no longer needed to prove it. Her dress was simple but clearly expensive, and her silver hair was pulled back in a classic chignon. A little, Harper admitted. I'm Eleanor Whitfield, the woman said, extending a hand. And you're the teacher who has Ethan Cole wrapped around her finger. Harper nearly choked on her champagne. I'm sorry, Eleanor laughed, a warm sound that crinkled the corners of her eyes. My dear, I've known that boy since he was 12 years old, and my late husband invested in his first company. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. You knew his mother, Harper said suddenly, remembering something Ethan had mentioned. Margaret was one of my dearest friends, Eleanor confirmed. Beautiful woman, brilliant pianist. She would have loved you. You don't even know me. I know you're real, Eleanor said simply. Do you know how rare that is in Ethan's world? Everyone wants something from him, money, connections, status. But you look at him like he's just a man. He is just a man, Harper said. Exactly, Eleanor smiled. That's why she would have loved you. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out over the glittering city below. Finally, Eleanor spoke again. It won't be easy. You know, dating someone like Ethan, there will always be people like Victoria Ashford, circling like sharks, waiting for you to stumble. I don't know if we're dating, Harper said quietly. I don't know what we're doing, don't you? Harper thought about quiet mornings in her apartment, Ethan's sleep-rough voice as he read her the news over coffee. She thought about the way he listened when she talked about her students, really listened, like their 7-year-old problems were as important as his billion-dollar deals. She thought about the way he kissed her, desperate and gentle all at once, like she was precious and necessary and his. I'm falling in love with him, she whispered, the words barely audible over the city noise below. And he's falling in love with you, Eleanor said matter-of-factly. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Harper could answer, she heard footsteps behind them. Ethan appeared in the doorway, bow tie loosened. Hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. There you are, he said, crossing to Harper immediately. I've been looking everywhere. Your friend Victoria needed your attention, Harper said, trying to keep her voice light. Ethan winced. Victoria is, he paused, clearly searching for the right words. We dated, briefly, last year. It ended badly. She's beautiful, Harper said. She's nothing compared to you, Ethan replied fiercely, his hands coming up to frame Harper's face. Harper, I'm sorry. I should have stayed with you, should have told Victoria to find me later. Eleanor cleared her throat delicately. I think that's my cue to leave. Lovely meeting you, Harper. Ethan, your mother would be proud. She squeezed Harper's hand briefly as she passed. Remember what I said, dear, when they were alone. Ethan stepped closer, backing Harper against the terrace railing. What did she say? He asked. That your mother would have loved me, Harper said softly. She would have, Ethan agreed, his thumb tracing along Harper's cheekbone. She would have loved how you laugh at my terrible jokes and how you make me want to be better than I am, Ethan. I'm in love with you, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out like he couldn't contain them anymore. I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably crazy, but I'm in love with you. Harper, completely, terrifyingly in love with you. Harper's breath caught. The feeling's mutual, she whispered, when he kissed her this time. It was different from their first kiss. different from the careful kisses they'd shared over the past 2 weeks. This kiss was claiming, desperate, full of everything they'd been holding back. Harper's hands fisted in his tuxedo jacket, pulling him closer, and Ethan's grip tightened on her waist, like he was afraid she might disappear. "Take me home, Harper," whispered against his lips. "Your place or mine?" Ethan asked, breathing hard. "I don't care. Just take me home." Harper woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the unfamiliar luxury of 1,000 thread-count sheets. For a moment, she was disoriented. Her apartment didn't have windows this large, and her mattress definitely didn't feel like sleeping on a cloud. Then she remembered Ethan's penthouse, the desperate elevator ride up 50 floors, hands in mouths and whispered confessions that felt like promises. She turned carefully in the massive bed, not wanting to wake the man sleeping beside her. Ethan lay on his stomach, one arm thrown across the space where she'd been sleeping, dark hair falling across his forehead. In sleep, he looked younger. The sharp lines of stress and responsibility smoothed away. Harper studied the broad expanse of his shoulders, the scattered freckles across his back that she'd discovered the night before, the way his breathing was deep and even. Last night had been revelatory, not just the physical intimacy though. That had been incredible, tender and passionate, and everything Harper had dreamed it might be, but the emotional vulnerability. Ethan had touched her like she was made of precious metal, kissed her like he was trying to memorize her taste, whispered her name like a prayer against her skin, and when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the aftermath, he'd held her like he never wanted to let her go. "Good morning." His sleep-rough voice startled her from her reverie. "Morning," she said softly, smiling as his gray eyes blinked open, immediately finding hers. "How did you sleep?" He shifted closer, his hand coming up to trace the line of her bare shoulder, like a rock. "Your bed is ridiculously comfortable." "It's not just my bed anymore," he said, and there was something serious in his voice that made Harper's heart skip. "I want it to be our bed." Harper felt her breath catch Ethan. "I know it's fast," he said, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look at her properly. "I know we've only known each other for a few weeks, but Harper, last night, being with you like that, waking up next to you, I don't want this to be temporary." Harper reached up to smooth the hair from his forehead, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. What are you saying?" "I'm saying move in with me. I'm saying let me take care of you. I'm saying I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." The words were everything Harper had been afraid to hope for and everything she was terrified to want. "Your world and my world, they're so different. So we'll build a new world," Ethan said simply. "One that fits both of us." Before Harper could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. He ignored it, but it buzzed again, then again. "You should get that," Harper said reluctantly. Ethan reached for the phone, frowning at whatever he saw on the screen. "It's my assistant. She says it's urgent." He answered the call, sitting up in bed. "Sarah, this better be what?" His voice went sharp, all traces of sleep disappearing. "When? How bad?" Harper watched his face change, saw the moment he shifted from the man who'd just asked her to move in with him, back into Ethan Cole, CEO. Something cold settled in her stomach. "I'll be there in an hour," he said curtly, then hung up. He turned to Harper, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. There's been a data breach at one of our subsidiary companies. It's bad. Go." Harper said immediately, pulling the sheet up to cover herself as she sat up. "I understand." "No, you don't understand." Ethan's voice was frustrated, almost angry. "This is what I was afraid of. This is why my world is so complicated. There's always going to be something, some crisis, some emergency that pulls me away from what matters. And I matter?" Harper asked quietly. "You matter more than anything," he said fiercely, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "That's the problem." Harper watched him dress in swift, efficient movements, the expensive suit transforming him back into the polished businessman she'd first met when he was ready to leave. He sat on the edge of the bed and took her hands. "Stay," he said. "Please, make yourself at home. There's food in the kitchen, or Maria can bring you anything you want. I'll be back as soon as I can." "I should go home," Harper said. "I have lesson plans to work on, papers to grade, Bring them here. Work from here. I have an office you can use. Or just spread out wherever you're comfortable. His grip on her hands tightened. I don't want you to leave. There was something almost desperate in his voice, and Harper felt her resistance crumbling. Okay. I'll stay. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you. I'll call you as soon as I know how long this is going to take. After he left, Harper wandered around the penthouse in one of his t-shirts, trying to reconcile this space with the man she was falling in love with. It was beautiful, all clean lines and expensive art and views that stretched for miles. But it felt cold somehow, impersonal, like a very expensive hotel rather than a home. She made coffee in his state-of-the-art kitchen, laughing at the instruction manual taped to the espresso machine. Even his coffee required a PhD to operate. As she explored, she found small traces of the Ethan she knew, a well-worn paperback on his nightstand, family photos tucked away in his home office, a guitar in the corner of his bedroom that looked like it had been played often. By afternoon, Harper had spread her grading across his dining room table and was deep in a stack of math worksheets when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Hello, is this Harper Reyes? The voice was crisp, professional. Yes, who is this? This is Jennifer Walsh from the New York Post. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Ethan Cole. Harper's blood ran cold. I'm sorry, what? We have photos of you leaving Mr. Cole's building this morning, and we understand you attended the Whitfield Foundation Gala with him last night. Our readers would love to know more about the mystery woman who's captured one of New York's most eligible bachelors. I don't have any comment, Harper said quickly. Are you living with Mr. Cole? How long have you been dating? What do you think about critics who say you're just after his money? Harper hung up, her hands shaking. Within minutes, her phone was ringing again, different numbers, more reporters. She turned it off. But the damage felt done. Somehow, their private world had been invaded, exposed, turned into gossip fodder. When Ethan finally returned that evening, he found Harper curled up on his couch, still in his t-shirt, looking small and shaken. Double quotes, hey, he said softly, dropping his briefcase and moving to sit beside her. How was your day? Reporters, Harper said without preamble. They've been calling all afternoon. They know about us, about last night, about me being here today. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did you tell them? Nothing. I hung up. But Ethan, they had photos. They know where I live, where I work. She looked up at him with wide, worried eyes. Is this what your life is like? People watching, following, digging into everything. Sometimes, he admitted. I'm sorry, Harper. I should have warned you, should have prepared you for this. How do you prepare for this? She asked. How do you live like this? Ethan pulled her against his side, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. You learn not to care what they say. You focus on what's real, what matters. What if they dig into my life, my family, my friends, my students' families? Harper's voice was getting higher, more panicked. I can't have that kind of attention on my classroom. These are kids, Ethan. They don't deserve to be part of some media circus. I'll handle it, Ethan said firmly. I'll call my security team, my lawyers. We'll make sure your school is protected, that your privacy is protected. Can you really do that? Can you really make them stop? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Harper felt her heart sink at his hesitation. I can try, he said finally. But Harper, if we're going to be together, really together, this is part of it. The attention, the scrutiny, the invasion of privacy. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it's the reality of my world. Harper pulled away from him, drawing her knees up to her chest. I don't know if I can handle that. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are, Ethan said with quiet conviction. You're the strongest person I know. I'm not, though. I'm just a teacher from Queens who fell for a guy way out of her league. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe this is all just noble of me, trying to make this work. Don't, Ethan said sharply. Don't let her get in your head. And don't you dare suggest that you're not good enough for me when the truth is, I'm not good enough for you. Harper shook her head. That's not, it is true, he interrupted, moving closer to her on the couch. Harper, you make me want to be a better man. You make me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just a corporation with a heartbeat. But I can't promise you that dating me will be easy. I can't promise that the media won't be intrusive, or that people won't judge you, or that my world won't try to change you. Then what can you promise me? Harper asked quietly. Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. I can promise that I'll love you with everything I have. I can promise that I'll fight for us for this, even when it gets hard. And I can promise that no matter what anyone says or writes or thinks, you'll always be the most important thing in my life. Harper searched his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the vulnerability. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I, he admitted. I've never had anything to lose before. Now I have everything to lose. They held each other then, both understanding that they were standing at a crossroads. Behind them lay the safety of their separate worlds, his empire of steel and glass, her classroom of finger paints and innocent laughter. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenges that would test everything they thought they knew about love and sacrifice and what it meant to build a life with another person. Stay tonight, Ethan murmured against her hair. We don't have to decide everything right now. Just stay. Harper nodded against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. Whatever came next, whatever decisions they had to make, she wasn't ready to leave this bubble of safety they'd created. Not yet. As they curled up together on the couch, Ethan's fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm, Harper realized that love wasn't just about the easy moments, the concerts and coffee dates and lazy Sunday mornings. It was also about choosing each other when the world got complicated, when the fairy tale collided with reality, when staying together required more courage than either of them knew they possessed. The question was, were they brave enough to find out if their love could survive the harsh light of Ethan's very public world? 6 weeks later, Harper stood in her tiny Queens apartment, staring at the stack of newspapers on her kitchen table. The headlines varied, but the sentiment was the same. Tech mogul's mystery girl, from classroom to penthouse. The teacher who tamed a billionaire. There were photos of her leaving her school, grainy shots of her and Ethan having coffee. Even one particularly invasive image of her grading papers through her apartment window. The attention had been relentless. Reporters camped outside her building, called her school, even approached her students' parents for quotes. She had to take a leave of absence when the media circus began affecting her classroom, and the isolation was eating at her. For 6 weeks, she'd been living between two worlds: Ethan's penthouse, where she felt safe but out of place, and her own apartment, where she felt like herself but under constant surveillance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Board meeting. Running late. Dinner at 8. I have something important to ask you. Harper's heart did a complicated flutter. She knew what he was going to ask. They'd been dancing around it for weeks. The future. What came next? How to make this impossible situation work. She'd seen the small velvet box he thought he'd hidden in his sock drawer. Had caught him looking at engagement rings on his laptop late at night, when he thought she was sleeping. The thought of marrying Ethan Cole terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. A sharp knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Harper peered through the peephole and sighed when she saw Victoria Ashford standing in the hallway, perfectly put together as always in a cream-colored coat. That probably cost more than Harper's monthly salary. What do you want, Victoria? Harper asked through the door. To talk. Please, it's important. Against her better judgment, Harper opened the door. Victoria swept into the small apartment, her critical gaze taking in the cramped space. The second-hand furniture, the stack of student artwork magneted to the refrigerator. Charming, Victoria said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Say what you came to say and leave, Harper said flatly. Victoria turned to face her, and for the first time since Harper had met her, the other woman looked almost sad. He's going to propose, Victoria said without preamble. I know, and you're going to say yes. That's none of your business, isn't it? Victoria moved closer, her voice urgent. Harper, I know you think I'm the villain in this story, the jealous ex trying to break up true love, but I need you to understand something. I care about Ethan. I've watched him build his empire, seen what the pressure and responsibility have cost him, and yes, I wanted to be the woman who helped him bear that weight. But you weren't, Harper said quietly. No, I wasn't. Victoria's smile was rueful. I thought I could be. I thought my connections, my understanding of his world, would be enough. But Ethan didn't need someone who could navigate his world. He needed someone who could remind him there was a world outside of it. Harper frowned, not sure where this conversation was heading. You did that, Victoria continued. You made him human again. Do you know he laughs now, really laughs, not just the polite chuckles he gives at board meetings. Do you know he's been turning down weekend work calls to spend time with you? Ethan Cole, who used to sleep in his office, is leaving work at reasonable hours because he can't wait to get home to you. Victoria, I don't understand why you're telling me this. Because, Victoria said, her voice breaking slightly, you're going to destroy him. The words hit Harper like a physical blow. What? Not intentionally, not maliciously. But Harper, look around you. Victoria gestured at this small apartment. This is who you are. This modest life. This quiet existence. This noble calling to shape young minds. It's beautiful, and it's real, and it's everything Ethan needs. But it's not sustainable. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. How long before the media attention destroys your career? How long before you resent having to live in his world? Attend his events, smile for cameras, when all you want is to be left alone? How long before you start to hate the very thing that makes him who he is? Harper felt something cold and terrible settling in her stomach, because Victoria was voicing fears she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. And when that happens, Victoria continued relentlessly, when you realize you can't be both Harper Reyes the teacher and Harper Cole the billionaire's wife, what do you think will happen to him? He'll choose you, Harper. He'll give up everything, his company, his responsibilities, his life's work to make you happy, and eventually, you'll hate him for that too. Stop, Harper whispered. I loved him once, Victoria said softly. Not the way you do, not with this pure, transformative love that makes him want to be better. I loved him selfishly, for what he could give me, how he could elevate my life. But you love him truly, deeply, so I'm begging you, if you really love him, let him go before you both destroy each other. With that, Victoria turned and walked out, leaving Harper alone with her fears and doubts, and the terrible possibility that everything Victoria had said might be true. That evening, Harper met Ethan at their favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in Little Italy that they'd discovered on one of their early dates. It was intimate and unpretentious, exactly the kind of place where they could pretend to be just another couple in love. Ethan was already waiting when she arrived, and her heart clenched at the sight of him. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, transforming from CEO to just the man she loved when he saw her. His entire face lit up with that smile that was hers alone. Hey, beautiful, he said, standing to kiss her softly. Hey, yourself. Harper slid into the booth across from him, trying to memorize this moment, the way the candlelight caught the silver in his eyes, the way his hand immediately reached for hers across the table, the way he looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. They ordered their usual pasta for her, risotto for him, a bottle of wine they'd developed a taste for together. The conversation flowed easily, as it always did. Ethan told her about his day, about the new charitable foundation he was starting in his mother's memory. Harper talked about the books she'd been reading, the lesson plans she was developing for when she could return to teaching. But underneath the normalcy, Harper could feel the weight of Victoria's words, the pressure of the decision she knew was coming. Harper, Ethan said suddenly, his voice nervous in a way she'd never heard before. There's something I want to talk to you about. Harper's breath caught. Ethan, I know this has been hard, he continued, his thumb tracing circles on her knuckles. The media attention, the scrutiny, having to put your career on hold. I know I'm asking you to give up a lot to be with me. You're not asking me to give up anything, Harper said quickly. I made my choices, but I want to make sure they're the right choices for both of us. Ethan took a shaky breath. Harper, I can't imagine my life without you in it. You've changed everything for me, the way I see the world, the way I see myself, what I want my legacy to be. You make me want to be worthy of the love you give me. Harper felt tears prick at her eyes. Ethan, please marry me, he said simply, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. I know it's complicated. I know my world is demanding, and sometimes cruel, and not at all what you signed up for. But I love you, Harper Reyes. I love your laugh and your kindness and the way you see beauty in everything. I love how you make me feel human again. Marry me, and let's figure out how to build a life that works for both of us." He opened the box to reveal a ring that was absolutely perfect. Not the massive diamond she might have expected, but a delicate, vintage piece with a sapphire center surrounded by small diamonds. It was elegant and understated and completely her. "It was my mother's," Ethan said softly. "She left it to me with a note saying to give it to the woman who made me remember what love was supposed to feel like." Harper stared at the ring, her heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. She could see their future stretching out before them, the challenges and the joy, the compromises and the victories, the way they'd have to fight for their love every single day against a world that wanted to pull them apart. She could also see Victoria's prediction playing out, the slow erosion of who she was, the resentment that might build, the way Ethan's love might become a cage instead of a freedom. "I love you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Is that a yes?" Ethan asked hopefully. Harper looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd changed her life, who'd shown her what it felt like to be cherished, who'd made her believe in fairy tales and forever and love that conquered all. This man who would give up everything for her, who would reshape his entire world to make her happy, who loved her so completely that he couldn't see how that love might eventually suffocate them. "Both, I love you," she repeated, her voice stronger. "Now, I love you so much that I can't do this to you." The hope in Ethan's eyes flickered. "What? I can't marry you, Ethan. I can't be the woman who takes you away from who you're meant to be." "Harper, what are you talking about? You don't take me away from anything, you bring me back to myself." "Do I?" Harper asked gently. "Or do I make you want to be someone you're not?" "Ethan, you have responsibilities. Thousands of people depend on you for their livelihoods. You have the power to change the world, to make it better. And I'm a teacher from Queens who can't even handle having her picture in the newspaper." "None of that matters," Ethan said desperately. "Harper, I don't care about any of that if I can't have you." "But you should care," Harper said, reaching across the table to cup his face in her hands. "That's who you are. That's what makes you extraordinary. And I won't be the person who makes you forget that." "So what are you saying?" Ethan's voice was raw with pain. "I'm saying that sometimes loving someone means letting them go," Harper whispered. "I'm saying that I love you too much to watch us destroy each other trying to make two incompatible worlds fit together." They sat in silence for a long moment, both crying now, both understanding that this was goodbye, even as neither wanted to say the words. "What if you're wrong?" Ethan asked finally. "What if we could make it work? What if I'm right?" Harper countered. "What if in 5 years you resent me for all the opportunities you missed, all the good you could have done? What if I resent you for turning me into someone I don't recognize?" Ethan closed his eyes, and Harper could see him processing the truth in her words, much as he didn't want to. "I don't know how to let you go," he admitted. "Neither do I," Harper said. "But I think maybe that's how we know this is real, how we know it matters, because it hurts this much to walk away." They finished dinner in relative silence, both trying to memorize each other, both trying to find the courage to say goodbye. When they left the restaurant, they walked slowly back toward Harper's apartment, hands intertwined, neither ready to break the final connection dot at her building. They stopped, and Ethan pulled her into his arms one last time. "I will never forget you," he whispered against her hair. "You saved me, Harper. You showed me what love could be." "You saved me too," she whispered back. "You showed me I was brave enough to dream bigger than I ever thought possible." They kissed then, soft and desperate, and full of goodbye. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. "Be happy," Harper said, stepping back. "Change the world. Make your mother proud. Be happy too." Ethan replied, "Teach those kids. Show them the same beauty you showed me." Harper nodded, then turned and walked into her building without looking back. If she had looked back, she would have seen Ethan standing there for a long time, looking up at her windows, before finally getting into his car and driving away. 3 months later, Harper returned to her classroom. The media attention had died down, moving on to other stories, other scandals. She threw herself back into teaching with renewed passion, pouring all the love she couldn't give Ethan into her students, She started a music program at her school. Remembering how moved Ethan had been by her passion for the arts, she didn't Google him, didn't follow the business news, didn't torture herself with updates about his life. But sometimes late at night, she'd play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 and remember the feeling of his hand in hers, the way he'd looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted. Ethan, for his part, threw himself into his work with a dedication that worried his friends and employees. He expanded the company's charitable giving, started programs for underprivileged children, endowed scholarships for teachers. He never spoke of Harper to anyone, but those who knew him well could see the change in him, a new depth, a new purpose, as if he'd learned something about what really mattered. Sometimes, driving through Queens, he'd think about stopping by her school just to see her smile again. But he never did. He'd loved her enough to let her go. He loved her enough to stay away. Both of them learned to be happy in their separate worlds, carrying the gift of what they'd shared, the knowledge that love, real love, was possible. That for a brief, shining moment, to people from different worlds had found in each other everything they'd been searching for. And maybe, in the end, that was enough.